Hi, I'm continuing on with my this free edible insect course I'm taking. So basically, the course the guy's advocating for it. He's makes his living off of, uh, uh, he's a teacher and things like that. And this is his thing, just like someone would be, a vegan would get up and talk to people. Why eating only vegetables is good, as opposed to, eating meat or something. So the point of view of this guy is that edible insects are edible and they should figure higher in our diet and the future diet, where we really have to start conserving resources, because what happens is the amount of feed and water that a cow needs to produce a pound of protein is way higher than the water and the food and the resources that a chicken needs to produce a pound of protein, pound of meat. But then we go down to insects, and they're way less for, food and water and, habitat area and things like that to produce this pound of, you know, meat or protein. So it does make sense. Now, he talks about different things to try to make you look and see how normal it is to eat insects. And to me, at least from what I've read, there's no doubt that early man, people are in this paleo diet thing, and it's no doubt in my mind that early man collected and ate insects. Now, a couple things he brings up that are kind of interesting. First, he's using this thing about innovation. How does innovation happen? And he's relating that to why people try or don't try insects. And of course, here in the United States, insects are just creepy crawlies, and you wouldn't want to touch them for any reason whatsoever. But now, of course, we have immigrants from all over that have been coming, and we have a large number of people from societies that do eat insects regularly. And I didn't realize that in Mexico, a lot of insects are eaten. I knew about Asia, the Asian cultures that do it, but evidently it is practiced in Mexico. So besides that conservation of resources that I mentioned, you also have this idea that it's a complete protein. Insects are complete proteins. So to take an area in Mexico that the person, he used an example, well, here's an area where basically they have corn to eat, and they have corn to eat, and they have corn to eat. Not a lot of other things that they eat. And this can set a child up in the developmental stage for having significant problems, because there's no the diet isn't varied that much, and corn isn't a complete protein. So what you can do is, instead of eating all of your corn as corn, you could farm insects, feed them the corn, and then eat the insects, and all of a sudden you have these proteins, amino acids that you didn't have before, because the insect can transport one thing into a different type of protein in its body. So it's sometimes not that a culture has a food shortage, they have a protein deficit. In other words, they're eating, but what they're eating just doesn't have enough protein. So the scheme here is to introduce more people to farming insects to have a better balance of protein and nutrients in the food they eat. And one of the things he talks about too is, there's growing quite a large industry in the United States for producing insects for pets. In other words, you raise crickets, mealworms, superworms, these different things, mealworms, and they're not being harvested from the wild. There's a factory somewhere, or maybe you don't want to say factory, but farm. I don't know, whatever you want to say. And he goes into details about raising some of the insects, but they're producing them, and you can go into just about any pet store and buy so many crickets or a jar with live mealworms in it or whatever, and you can take that home and feed it to your reptile or other type of thing that you have that eats insects. And same way as if you, at least here in Maine, if you go into a hardware store that sells chickens every once in a while, they have basically dried mealworms. And chickens, I know when I had silky chickens, they're just crazy about these things. It's like you put some of those down on the ground, you got to spread them around a little, because they really want to be the only one that gets them. So normally if chickens are allowed to free range, say you're giving them feed and you're letting them not completely free range, but let's say you have a fenced-in area that's quite large, which my backyard was for the number of chickens, these silky chickens I had. But they say if you were to take the chickens and perform autopsies, which people did, you find that their stomach contents is 50% insects. So that's the natural diet of a chicken, to get that, have 50% insects and 50% plant material or whatever, or in the case of feeding chickens, it's going to be chicken feed. And of course, if the chickens are being raised in cramped quarters and they don't have a lot of space, they're going to be eating more, getting all their nutrients just from the chicken feed. One of the things that's remarkable when you first have chickens is that when you crack the first egg, it's like, what is this? The yolk is a different color. It's much more vibrant. It's like you break an egg from the backyard and break an egg from the store, and it's amazing how different they look. But so anyway, this idea of raising, if we can't eat insects, we can feed them to animals that we are going to eat. So in other words, you could see a chicken feed being manufactured that had a large amount of insect protein in it, or you yourself could do it. Not everybody's going to want to try that, but I was thinking about it when I had chickens for a while. I had them for a couple of years until the predators got them all, and but it just makes sense that and he was talking about too that insect protein could be the protein component of dog food or cat food or whatever food, different types of pets or farm animals. That could be the part of the protein source. And part of me says, gee, we had a dog that was wicked allergic to things. And at the end, his ears, if he got something bad, they'd pop. He was a hound dog, so he's got these long flappy ears. He'd get into something bad, and his ears would blow up like they were balloons. So he had to go on a restrictive diet, and then after a while, the dog would become allergic to that. So you kept switching proteins, and having that option of insect protein-based dog food probably would be a good choice for a dog that has developed, allergies to proteins. Now, unfortunately, here now in the United States, insects are expensive. When they're raised for pets, you don't have the same standards of what would be needed if you were raising them for human food. And I guess some people eat, go to pet stores and buy their insects there and eat them. But I would be a little wary of that, because again, what animals can tolerate much higher degree of things and not get sick than we can. So the two main factors, I guess, I would say in the United States why more of this isn't being eaten is the yuck factor. insects, creepy crawlies, and the actual expense. Right now, if you buy a powdered cricket, in other words, they take crickets, they raise them. I'm not sure how they kill them, but he said in the thing. But then you freeze dry them, you grind them up, freeze dry them, then grind them up into a powder like thing. Well, that powder costs right now $35 a pound. And I meant, add that to compare that to the idea how little regular flour costs, being, say from $1 to $3. That's a significant difference. But of course, it's a significant source of protein. And it would seem that price will eventually be going down as more people are using it. And he does also talk, which is good, about the problems with harvesting insects from the wild. There's quite a bit that he talks about that, and how that basically they're being over-harvested now. Now there are people, a culture, the economy goes up, more jobs, cities, more jobs in the city. These people go to the city and they want insects. They've been eating them before, they want to still eat them. And so for people that are poor out in the rural areas without, jobs, collecting insects and selling them through some intermediary to be eaten in the city is a really good income. So some things are being over-harvested. And, we forget that insects play a very important role sometimes in the ecosystem. And, if you over-harvest that, you're going to have some other problems in the balance of the system. So anyway, I'll give you some more information as we go along. But I just thought that was interesting about protein deficit diets, and also the idea of, insects being too icky to eat, but feeding them to animals that are either pets or animals that you will eat. Tell me what you think. Bye.